Hello, everyone, and welcome to Policy Re-Evolution. My name is Yola Harb, and I'll be your moderator today. I started with Cartus 22 years ago as a consultant and have grown up in the industry and seen a lot of changes over the years, but this year has been quite different. And although many factors have disrupted our paths, we're navigating through the storm to a stronger future. So as we emerge from the pandemic and with a focus on 2021, we're finding many organizations are looking to modify their relocation programs and offerings. So in this session, we're going to focus on today's relocation drivers, what organizations are looking to focus on for tomorrow, and how technology supported by the human element can help future-proof our relocation programs. So joining me today on the panel are Alex Harris, VP of Client Services, who's located in the UK. She supports our global client base and works in close collaboration with them on policy and process transformations, bringing to the table 18 years of industry experience. And hi, Alex. And we also have Larry Gerardo, so business owner of MovePro 360, our new client portal, which was launched early this year. His extensive client experience in global mobility and in expatriate tax and compliance makes him the perfect fit for our key product development. And he understands the relocation needs of organizations, both at the employee and employer level. So welcome both, and thank you so much for being part of this forward-thinking session.
Thank you, Yola. Delighted to be here.
Yep, me as well. Thank you very much.
Sure. So, Alex, let's start with you. And I just wanted to, take a look at relocation today. So there's so much information out there for mobility owners, especially when it comes to data and program evolutions like CoreFlex. And as you know, there's a lot of conversation on the subject in our industry. What are you hearing from top companies? And specifically, what do they need to know to make informed decisions and drive their programs forward?
Thank you, Yola. Yes, indeed, it is a big challenge for most companies, and it has been compounded even further by the pandemic we've experienced this year. Most of us have certainly not experienced anything quite like it, and certainly not on such a massive global scale. And yet, despite that global shock, companies are staying very focused, even resilient, against such a challenging landscape of global talent shortages, changing employee demographics, and cost pressure, all while maintaining that laser focus on enhancing their employee experiences. So perhaps it's not surprising that with all of these challenges, program leaders have been really looking outside of mobility to gather inspiration on how to transform, how to stay competitive, and stay ahead of the curve. So some of the key areas that we have seen as of high focus in 2020 include, first of all, omni-channel delivery frameworks. So really looking at how programs are delivered and crafted for employees, redesigning, frankly, to serve a multi-generational workforce for different workforces, in fact, and how to really balance their priorities and preferences as they consume relocation as a service. So, for instance, more experienced assignees who may be approaching retirement age or empty nesters are more likely to be attracted by traditional policy choices and more formal company-guided support. Whereas we know millennials, who already represent 50% of the global workforce, are really looking for something that is instant, great access to information, a lot of personalization in selection of benefits. So that's one component. And this, of course, ties in very closely with the big data arms race. So companies are really looking at different ways to obtain that holistic view of the relocation data in order to really harness that data and drive policy design and decision making. Now, the challenge, as we know, is that relocation relies on numerous experts, lots of different delivery partners, internal and external, who together are compiling millions upon millions of assignment data points, including milestones, cost data, utilization stats, and quantitative and qualitative feedback from employees who are relocating. So the key is really how to harness and pull together all of this information in a way that it provides relevant insights and enables us to take very specific actions against it. So a single source of truth, if you will.
Yes, which, Alex, in addition to all that data, right, we hear about employee experience, and there seems to be a drive to balance the two. So how are organizations approaching this need to create a better experience for relocating employees and their families?
Well, indeed, it is a growing divergence of needs, and that is certainly forcing organizations to think quite differently about how employees perceive value. So that means companies are really looking much more to put the employee in control of the relocation and in control of the services that they will consume in order to ensure that those really fit the needs of the employee and their families. And it's just so true that one size does not fit all. Let me give you an example. So most traditional policies today have had to cut back on numerous components of support, one of which is pet transportation. And for most people, that makes perfect sense, right? It is a reduction in order to protect perhaps not making cuts on other benefits. However, when we play that out at an individual level, that can look very different. So take me as an example. I don't have children or a lot of personal belongings. So, any benefits pertaining to education and household goods shipment are less likely to be of appeal to me. But I do have 3 lovely, very naughty dogs who, to me, are my kids. So if I was relocating, I would absolutely exchange other benefits in order to be able to ship my pets. Not being able to ship my pets, for me personally, would be a deal breaker. And yes, we know that there are exceptional processes in place for employees to raise their needs to their organization. But I would challenge that my situation is not particularly exceptional. It's in fact probably quite normal. And it's not an exception, it's simply my circumstances and priorities. So that's where relocation has begun emulating HR benefit trends in offering that flexible support. It's actually not a new concept. HR benefits have been offered as flexible benefits for more than 10 years. So whilst mobility was not the first to the game, I think the whole industry is eager to move quickly to adopt this model because it provides that essential flexible choice. Certainly not a fad. Quite on the contrary, it is very much growing and here to stay.
Yeah, and I think so many people, Alex, can relate to your example as far as wanting that flexibility and choice based on their personal situation. So, again, it's not unique needs. So they just need the flexibility to really make those choices that impact them and their families.
Exactly. So what we're actually witnessing is numerous organizations actually pushing towards this use of core flex as a philosophy. We estimate that 73% of our client base already is using core flex or considering moving towards a core flex model that allows some level of employee choice. And the really interesting part is that not a single construct that we have seen is exactly the same as another. The frameworks that are being developed really vary quite significantly dependent on the corporate philosophy, the talent management strategy, and frankly, their level of flexibility in terms of employee selected benefits for HR. I think a really good example that demonstrates this level of different construct is how companies are approaching the surplus of cash or credits within the program after an employee has selected their benefits. Even in this element alone, we have seen a multitude of different approaches. So we've seen some clients simply do not wish to provide any incentive for non-usage of services. So no cash, use it or lose it. We have seen organizations pay out 100% of the unused benefits to employees as a lump sum. We have seen cash being shared between the organization and the employee. And even now we're seeing new iterations of this, with companies looking to consider, should we permit employees to carry that unused benefit forward into ongoing assignment support or repatriation benefits. So in summary, all of these events that we've experienced in 2020 have really accelerated this push towards flexible working arrangements and flexible policies. Data mining, cost containment remain a significant priority. And I would say that providers of all fields and sizes are really striving to serve this new core flex design. Everyone from service line specialists, tech overlay companies to RMCs, who of course handle all aspects of relocation.
Yeah, and you know, I think the next thing is where are we heading tomorrow, right? So, you know, as far as core flex, we know is not a fad, it's here to stay. So let's talk about that, Alex. Where are we heading? So based on the insights you have from clients and peers, this seems like to be a continued focus, right? And especially when it comes to cost, talent, and ROI. What are companies planning as they finish out 2020 and head into 2021?
Well, indeed, as we move into 2021, of course, we're all hoping to see the end of COVID. But certainly a lot of efforts are already being refocused on how to accomplish all of these key strategic objectives. I would say the first really critical one, of course, is that deeper integration with talent management functions. So again, companies have understood for a long time that relocation can be a very powerful tool for recruitment, development, and retention of top talent. But the time has really come now to leverage that and actually make some structural changes to their own internal teams in order to strengthen that collaboration and delivery between talent acquisition and talent management and the mobility teams. And whilst that may sound like a fairly straightforward thing to do, it certainly can be incredibly challenging, because what we have seen is that talent acquisition is traditionally a very locally led business unit for all the right reasons, whereas of course relocation or mobility tends to be much more regionally or globally led. So really bringing these two powerhouses together is so critical. And the way in which we're seeing organizations do that is by really lining up the reporting lines for the mobility team into talent management business units. And really with a very clear goal to support the growth and talent development strategies, and to really make sure that all of the career pathing organizationally, the career modeling, and the plans they have for their top talent fully take into account the opportunities that are available within corporate mobility. Closely tied in with that, of course, is return on investment. And again, this has often been described as the holy grail of relocation. But again, today more than ever, companies have a really renewed sense of purpose. Not surprising, considering the many cost and talent pressures that they face, to really try and define their mobility programs' return on investment. And we have seen some significant headway in this space, actually. A lot of it facilitated by the harnessing of data, aggregated data in particular. And we've seen organizations taking both quantitative and qualitative components to really build what that ROI looks like for them. And let me give you some examples. So the quantitative elements, perhaps more traditional components such as cost of the program, retention and progression statistics, but actually thinking a little bit more creatively about the qualitative ones, because mobility does also play a really important role in helping to build capability for organizations, particularly if they're opening a new plant or building a new service center. And also business continuity for key roles. So using mobility to ensure that that top talent, the movers and shakers, are able to quickly and easily relocate for business purposes.
Yeah, certainly a lot for mobility owners to consider. And we throw on top of that, on top of what you just discussed, a big trend which has emerged as a result of the pandemic. So remote workers and virtual assignments certainly are things that we're hearing now out in our industry, and never a dull moment, right? As we know in the relocation world. And I know you're staying on top of this trend based on an article that you had shared with me. So how are companies addressing this new workforce?
For sure, remote workers have long been utilized by organizations to fulfill different roles and duties, particularly in Europe. But as part of creating this new cohesive structure I was describing, companies are also looking at, is this the right time and the right opportunity to centralize the management of all cross-border workers? So whether that's EBTs, local foreign hires, commuters, and historically, many of these populations have actually been either served locally or through different tools or processes that have actually made them quite invisible to the mobility team. So the key here is to deliver solutions that, first of all, provide that visibility to those populations, very important, and then integrate them into the scope of the mobility teams for consistency, efficiency, and compliance. Now, of course, I must add that despite the push to bring these populations into mobility, it is quite important to note that that doesn't mean necessarily that they receive the same support as traditional expats or international transfers. Companies are often focusing on tech-driven, lower touch, lower cost approach that can deliver, first of all, compliance, but second of all, speed. And crucially, it's so important that there is a very early activation entry point for these moves into the framework for local talent acquisition teams. So a lot of benefits that can be derived from really bringing that visibility and that integration into this population. And then finally, to address the point that you made, the pandemic has certainly propelled us to look at other type of solutions to keep business moving forward. So, for example, virtual assignments are being considered certainly by a number of organizations. Although I would say somewhat limited to roles and industries where it is possible for those roles to be performed remotely. It is crucial, though, to remember that there are significant immigration and tax implications associated with this scenario, but we are seeing more willingness both at a corporate level and at a governmental level to find solutions and find ways to support this growing population. Very recently, in fact, Dubai launched a virtual working program for foreign professionals, the first of its kind in the Middle East, for those who are seeking to work remotely in Dubai but remain employed in their home country. And that brings me into Core Flex version 2.0. So those organizations that have already made some headway and implemented Core Flex frameworks into their program are already looking at what comes next. So how can they broaden that philosophy and not just provide flexible choices in logistical upfront benefits, but actually into ongoing benefits? And that really means looking at how host benefits can be adjusted to better suit the employee's needs in the host location. So let me give you an example. A single employee today would traditionally still receive a housing allowance that enables them to rent a property for themselves. However, in a Core Flex version 2.0, if that employee actually is very comfortable with the idea of house sharing, he or she may choose to redirect some of that housing allowance to increasing the frequency of their home leave travel. So in essence, again, it really trying to maximize the value for the employee, really give them what they need, as opposed to what traditionally has been provided. So we think this is going to continue. The reach of choice is going to expand across more services. We believe this is going to then organically reshape the way in which companies structure their policies, and naturally that will also flow to third parties and on-the-ground partners. So instead of the kind of traditional static scopes of work, we can almost envision a world where we say, you know, for a settling in program, rather than listing out all of the things that you are allowed to complete within that time with the provider on the ground, actually, why don't we simply allow the time and almost put aside what, you know, is company driven selection of benefits, clearly with some guardrails, with some minimum expectations around key areas that need to be taken care of, but again, allowing more flexibility for employees to make those choices for their family.
Yeah, I feel like it's really creating that holistic solution for organizations and their relocation programs. It's certainly an exciting time to be in our industry. You know, Larry, I want to talk to you about the technical side of it, right? The harnessing that technology. Alex had shared with us, right, her vision of where we're headed, and it makes a lot of sense. She referenced the big arms race, and we hear so much about data and its importance, but harnessing data requires skill and effort, doesn't it? And you know, from your perspective, where are we in the relo industry with mining that data, and where do you think we're heading?
Yeah. Hi, Yola. Yes, you are correct. Some people think that data just happens, whether we like it or not. In reality, things, events, decisions are happening that give rise to data, right? So that's the simple part. As you and Alex have both stated, the challenge lies in the collection and exploitation of data. Our industry is amid the perfect storm of sorts, and I mean that in a good and exhilarating way, with key elements aligning to propel us forward. And by key elements, I'm referring to the convergence of three major factors. First, you have company priorities. Second, employee choice. And third, technology. And when we talk about technology, I'm really talking about both the capabilities of designing products and tools, as well as the ability to develop systems and algorithms to exploit data in smart and actionable ways. These elements, as you might imagine, are inextricably linked such that they are influencing and or fueling the others in a sort of mobility vortex that feeds off itself. Taming that vortex is the challenge, and data plays a very important role in that process.
Yeah, so break it down for us a little bit, Larry. You mentioned three major factors that are creating that perfect storm, but in a good way, right? So tell us what those are.
Truly so. So the three key elements that are swirling around the industry are, as I mentioned, company priorities. We're seeing programs most focused on cost, compliance, talent, and duty of care. And the complexities with these, as Alex was referring to, are found in the multi-layered sum of the parts when you consider the different users of the data within an organization, such as HR, finance, business units, talent management, and of course, employees and even others. So satisfying the needs of the many and how they expect to use the data for their own purposes is that real challenge to tackle. When it comes to employee choice, we're referring to employee self-selection of benefits that best fit for their personal or family situation, diversity, culture, or preferences. As Alex mentioned, the demand for choice is increasing. And as we've all experienced in the consumer world, data is being used to inform, guide, and influence. The mobility world is simply poised to follow suit. So, and finally, in the area of technology, we're seeing the design and delivery of products and tools that provide the framework of core flex delivery. And it's important to note that the framework is not just about offering choices for the employee, that flexibility. It's also about offering a level of flexibility for program leaders to manage their business priorities based on company culture and strategic goals. With the development and adoption of these technologies and tools, data can be harvested to inform all stakeholders, employer and employee alike.
And so, Larry, we actually, we have a pretty good sense of the theory behind Core Flex and why companies and employees are increasingly embracing this approach to policy. And you mentioned technology tools and data usage. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by these and how will they affect or influence our industry?
Sure. So let me emphasize a couple of things first that I sort of mentioned. For technology tools, I'm talking about the Core Flex technology platforms that provide that flexible framework I was talking about. Mm-hmm. For the company, it's really the ability to set what's core and what's flex, considering company culture, strategic goals, and relocation goals mentioned. And for the employee, it's the system provided information giving transparency of options and personal choice or flexibility to fit their needs.
Well, I've also heard you speak about smart data, right? And different ways we can approach data to make it really meaningful and impactful to our industry. So give us some examples of that.
Okay, sure. As for smart data usage, it's first helpful to understand the different approaches to exploiting data and the opportunities those bring in order to make smart decisions and to see where we're going. So in the area of decisions, you can approach it in different ways. You may have heard of data-driven or data-informed decisions. So data-driven decisions, quite simply, is what it sounds like, where the data fully dictates the end decision. In essence, a human is not involved at the point of the decision. On the other end of the spectrum are data-informed decisions, and that's where humans use data to make decisions. It's important to note that it really is a spectrum. It's not an either-or proposition, and where you fall on that spectrum will depend on your company culture and the situations presented. So let me, thought I'd give you an example of this approach and as to making decisions. So think about GPS navigation systems that help us get to where we're going, right? While these are data-driven systems and they're amazing, they are not perfect. You know, how many of you have followed GPS guidance to the wrong destination? I certainly have. And an example, years ago, in the early days of personal nav GPS systems, we used one to guide us to Yosemite National Park in California and found ourselves at one point on a rugged logging road in the mountains and had to turn around and recalibrate. And that was after going miles on a bumpy road, wondering if we were going the right direction and whether and how much we should trust the GPS system. We were led astray by data in that instance and also against our better judgment, and we nearly got lost. Fortunately, we came to our senses and course corrected.
Yeah, Larry, you had another example that you'd shared with me, and I'd love for you to talk about that one as well. I think it's, it was about getting to your house, right? And I felt this was so relevant when we talk about data because there's actually a human element to this, right? Where because there's two different systems that are telling your friends how to get to your house, you actually have to intervene from the human side to tell them which system really to look at, right? So please share that example.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's a key concept is really, as we're talking here, is to not necessarily just blindly trust data. You really do need that human involvement. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But yeah, for the example, a very personal example for me, there are two very commonly used GPS applications that provide different directions to get to my house. One brings you right to our front driveway as expected, while the other brings unsuspecting drivers to about, I'd say about 300 feet behind our house on a dirt road, maybe that dirt logging road again. No, we don't live near Yosemite. But down a hillside, and there's no ability to reach that. So reliance on data alone can cause problems, as I mentioned, and I'm sure we've all been there. The point being that countless people find themselves lost or even becoming involved in accidents each year as they blindly follow the instructions of a satellite nav system, unable to account for real life circumstances affecting the path of the road. So using your own judgment along with the GPS guidance is an example of making data-informed decisions.
Mm-hmm. And I can't tell you how many times I've had that issue with GPS, especially when there are new roads, right, that the system doesn't recognize. And so as we, talk about a lot of data, right, and harnessing the data, and we continue that theme of harnessing data, I see three systems or approaches that you've highlighted for us on this slide. How are these related to the relocation industry?
Yeah, happy to share that. So we talked about making the decisions, but this is where I guess it really gets fun, especially for our data scientists and then for us as users. But it's really, there are different approaches with how we exploit data. So I'll start with, and we'll go through these three. From on the left side, you have classification systems. Those are used to predict the probability that an item belongs to a certain class, such as like a dog or cat, fraud, or legitimate, or maybe low risk or high risk. So consumer culture examples that we might be familiar with are things like credit risk, where credit agencies are assessing our risk profile, whether we're low, medium, or high risk. Spam filters is another one I think many of us have seen. I've certainly seen them on my phone. You can get them, use them on email as well. But it's detecting whether something is spam or not spam. Insurance fraud, as I mentioned, is another example where a claim is considered legitimate or fraudulent based on the facts and circumstances and the algorithms used. And then maybe one that we all recognize, or many of us do, with respect to automobile insurance, Safe Driver app, something that I have on my phone and comes with me when I'm driving along. The insurance company, through my phone and GPS, is able to tell whether I'm a low, medium, or high risk driver. And I won't tell you which it is, but I know that if I follow the rules and I drive safely, I can achieve discounts through my Safe Driver app. So those are some consumer culture examples that might drive this example home. On the relocation industry side, we think about things like exception risk, low, medium, or high risk based on the facts and circumstances, whether or not the situation is likely or more likely or less likely to cause exceptions. Move risk might be another one where we can have a status indicator that can predict or track whether a move is on track or off track based on a targeted move date, or possibly high value goods detection, and that would be from photos or video and the data contained therein. So number two, the middle one, is regression systems. Those are used to predict a numerical quality such as costs or maybe even duration. Consumer examples might be things like real estate price estimates or travel industry price trends, such as a kayak site or a hopper app. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's one that I've used to predict pricing and when to purchase airline tickets if we ever get to do so in the future. So on the relocation industry side, when we think about regression systems, Alex mentioned earlier, I think, cost estimates. So move costs and mobility spend are examples of that. Back to sort of the move risk, if you will, you can have move duration, which is how long a move will take based on dynamic factors. So the algorithms used to predict a range of dates for the move, as well as an estimated move date. And then maybe more mundanely, but certainly very important, is move volume forecasting that we're all interested in, to know where the business is going and how to manage it. And then the third item here is recommender systems. These are fun and exciting, and we're all very familiar with them, I think. So recommender systems are algorithms aimed at searching through a large volume of dynamically generated information to provide users with personalized content and services. So on the consumer side, think about Amazon.com, where they recommend items such as people who bought this also looked at these or also purchased these items. Also think about Netflix, for example, where they provide personalized recommendations. For relocation, thinking about the employee, we can recommend services or benefits for those employees or transferees based on their facts and circumstances, like location or job type. So think about receiving as a transferee the data or information that says people like you selected these benefits X% of the time, and that's an assist or informs the transferee to make decisions. On the program side, similarly, it can be used for benchmarking, if you will, where the algorithms can also help advise or inform what other organizations and employees of those organizations are doing.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I was going to say, in a
Yeah.
nutshell, it's not just about having the data, right? You need to know what you're going to use it for, and ideally maybe use a mixture of all of those different systems. And it's very exciting to know we're already using, as you described, Larry, so many different ways to get to the right outcomes, actionable outcomes.
It really is. You're exactly right.
Yeah, and so with that, Larry, you know, what should organizations then be considering as they look to decide, right, on the direction that they want to take?
Yeah, so that's kind of a deep question. I'll keep it high level at this point, because the answer is really to let your company culture be the guide as to how you exploit or use data to make smart decisions. Certainly, you know, we'll help you along the way, and we'll be providing information and guiding you and giving you options. But you have to think about, like Alex said earlier, one size does not fit all. Each company is unique, which means that ultimately it will be up to you and your company to determine where you are on that decision spectrum and what approach and data you use to make decisions.
Yeah, and you know, with that comes that whole concept of balancing, right, the experience. And we've talked a lot about technology and data and algorithms that, you know, are really aimed at providing recommendations to relocating employees to ease that decision process. But we also hit on diversity of relocating employees, their personal situations and goals. You know, Alex, with your, you know, example of your 3 dogs, right, your naughty dogs. And, you know, while recommendations are good to have, there's a human element, an interaction that really needs to happen at the beginning and really throughout, right, the process, which impacts that experience. And there's key human, you know, connections and interactions for mobility leaders as well, Alex, right? And so kind of talk about that balanced approach for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a question that we talk a lot about with some of the corporate clients that we serve. It's, you know, how far will technology, you know, be able to solve issues and how much can we leverage it? Now, whilst the technology enhancements that Larry described are a huge step in helping empower mobility teams and users to make better choices, I do think it's incredibly important to never forget that there is a vital human element that truly impacts the overall quality and success of a relocation. And it is that human element. So, you know, for the user of the service, the family, it's so important to remember that, you know, relocation is a very personal, very emotive life event that is impacting not just the employee, but the entire family and friends. So even if there are certain components within the relocation program that are transactional, those should absolutely be simplified with technology, but we shouldn't lose sight of the value of really supporting somebody through that emotive end-to-end journey of relocation. And this is where I would say the consultant is so central to that journey, because they're really there to help the employee navigate not just the practical elements, but the emotional steps in the process. And they're there really to help read and understand and translate the needs of that family and their situation into the best choices that they can make for themselves under the Core Flex framework. So actually what we have seen is a really nice evolution for the consultant role as well, whereby, you know, some of the more transactional elements of their role have, you know, been replaced by technology, really allowing them to be even more consultative than they have been in the past, and really help set those expectations, you know, anticipate challenges and proactively address those. So those are elements that definitely robots and computers and data cannot right now replace. And then for organizations as well, you know, this approach that we're talking about allows for, you know, a lot of data-driven decisions to be made and for ongoing adjustments to become much more organic. But again, so important to infuse, you know, some thought leadership into how that data is reviewed and implemented, and to continuously think about how well the outcomes are serving the strategic objectives of the program, and really leveraging your partner to, you know, get those fantastic insights from the marketplace, and making sure that all of the voices within your organization, whether they be HR or line management, are all being served by this new framework. So I certainly think there's a huge role there for RMCs and partners, because there will always be uncharted territory. So I think balancing that out with some high quality insights is really, really key.
So you're saying, Alex, it's not just about data.
Sorry, Larry, it is not just about data. Data is fantastic, and it is definitely pushing us forward, but
although Larry wants it to be a lot about data, you know, it's balance, Larry, it's balance. But you know, as we, you know, really talk about, and we started off with, you know, all these pieces, right? The experience, the data, and really this is almost like bridging it together, and talking about future proofing. I love, Larry, that future proofing concept. So, you know, we talked about the rise of Core Flex and how companies are really keeping pace with needs. And we've looked at the key elements, right, of company priorities, that again, the employee choice, that experience side of it, the technology and data, Larry, which, you know, you love. But it's coming together really to influence and drive our industry forward. What does that really mean? So how do we future-proof our programs, and what's going to help us really make that happen?
Yeah, so thank you. I'm glad you asked, finally. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to put a plug back in for technology and data. No, you know, I can't emphasize enough the combination of these elements and the message that Alex just delivered, the infusion. And I think I hope that's been apparent through our discussion here for everybody, that Data is powerful, but there needs to be other inputs, if you will. So future-proofing of mobility programs is the next logical step in this evolution towards a truly agile approach to global mobility policy. Global mobility, like many industries, is being transformed by that intelligent exploitation of data to create efficiency, transparency, and cost savings for all stakeholders. While the use cases mentioned, as well as others, can drive the industry towards transformation, the true litmus test and impetus will be client and transferee adoption of these new technologies. Once the technologies have penetrated business processes, we expect to see shifts in behavior of clients and transferees. And as a result, we will see shifts in the characteristics of incoming data, which in turn will guide others, and so on goes that cycle. So these shifts will provide more and more data that will enable the learning systems we spoke of, classification, regression, and recommender, to be tied together into meta learning systems or larger systems called reinforcement learning systems. And those themselves can learn not only from data, but also from feedback and input that we're talking about, like client strategy, objectives, and culture. And if I could step back for just a second as an example to the GPS example we were talking about, if you think about it, it's the same type of thing or cycle where the GPS systems are providing data, providing information to guide us. We're making informed decisions based on that, hopefully, not trusting it blindly, making informed decisions. And when we alter the course, as we oftentimes do, I know I do, the system recalibrates, recalculates, and sets a new path. And that's what we're talking about here with the mobility world and the evolution of policies. So these systems can learn what to do, just like the GPS systems, how to map situations to actions to reach an objective by a process of. So in essence, we are navigating to a place where the flexible framework of policy combined with technology and data science will create an opportunity for a truly agile or iterative approach to policy, where policy can and will evolve as much as you let it in a controlled and smart way, subject to the guardrails you're comfortable with in your organization and that you've defined based on your company and your goals. This is the re-evolution of future-proofing of your programs we're talking about.
Love that
Right.
word, future-proofing.
So to paraphrase you, Larry, what we're really talking about is getting away from that traditional waterfall approach to policy development. No more stale policies on the shelf collecting dust and waiting months and months for somebody to come and take a look and to have time to come and take a look. As we move forward and we're using this core flex, it sort of organically, each step is actually creating that iteration and that refreshed view of the policy. So making sure we stay relevant and competitive.
It is. It's that human input and that helps to make those decisions. So you're exactly right, Alex. You put it very well. The alignment of core flex philosophy and adoption, along with the technology tools and smart data, have put us on an exciting path of transformation that will build upon itself, continue to evolve, and provide you with that opportunity to build and future-proof your programs.
Excellent discussions, both Alex and Larry. I certainly want to thank both of you for joining us on this panel, and I really wish we could have been together in person, you know, on the stage, going through this but again, the discussions are certainly interesting and looking really forward thinking right into the years to come, not just 2021, but I think even, you know, beyond beyond next year. For everyone else who's listening to us, please join us in the networking lounge for Q&A.
Thank you, Yola. As I like to say,